Hello, welcome to our final session of the day. I'm Russ Levins, Vice President of Communications at CAT, and I'm really pleased to welcome you to our fireside chat with Derek Dobson, our Plan Manager and CEO. We've received a lot of questions today, so really pleased to share them, but we're also monitoring for new questions. So if you still have a question and you haven't gotten a chance to submit it yet, please submit it right now using the Submit a Question feature. That's on the left-hand side of your screen under Agenda plus Live Stream. To your right, you're going to see a function called Poll. I'm sure many of you have used this already today. We're planning on having a few polls for you during the chat with Derek. Let's start with the poll right now. The poll question we'd like to ask you is, what are you most interested in hearing from Derek about? There are 5 choices: CAT's performance, workforce of the future, innovation and planning, cross-Canada coverage, and then finally, college insights. So I'm going to pause for a minute there and let you vote. What do you want to hear about today? Lots of you voting. Thank you for that. And it looks to me like what you want to hear about is innovation and planning. And that's great because that is part of our agenda today and something we're absolutely going to get to. Now I'd like to welcome Derek Dobson, our CEO and Plan Manager, to the chat. Welcome, Derek.
Hi, Russell.
Good to see you today.
Likewise, Russell. And first of all, I want to welcome all our members, our employers, other stakeholders, some of our union participants I've seen in the attendee list, some regulators. So welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining.
Thank you. So Derek, earlier today, we heard from CAT's CFO and our Chief Investment Officer, and they talked about our plan's performance, our funding status, our investment strategy, all of that critical stuff. Putting the numbers aside for a minute, how would you say CAT's doing?
Well, I think we're hitting on all cylinders. You've just referenced Russell, our leading investment performance. We're very proud of that because that helps secure our pension plan clearly. But it was also referenced in one of the breakout groups how CAT already has very high service level agreements with all of our employers, meeting member expectations. And we've been exceeding those. And again, that happened in 2022 as well. Our joint governance model, the plan governors are focused on innovation, focused on our purpose, our mission, our vision statement. So everything's really running well at the CAT pension plan for our members and our employers.
That's great. Let's jump into some of our questions from our members. I'm going to paraphrase some of them, and a lot of them are around specific themes that kept coming up again and again. So we're going to start with one that I've seen a couple of times. And the question is this. Basically, CAT's been growing year over year. CAT's been growing. And some of our members, especially the members that have been with us for a long time, are wondering about why are we working so hard to bring in new members? And they're saying in some cases, I don't understand how this benefits me. Can you speak to that?
Sure, absolutely. And I'll start with some of the survey questions that I look for annually every year when our survey is done is how much do our members trust the plan, trust what we're doing, believe in our growth strategy? And I'm pleased to share with everybody that 19 out of every 20 members trust our pension plan and our strategic direction. So that's sort of, we're always testing with our members, are we on the right track? So to get into the question about what's in it for them for opening up the plan to new employers and new members across Canada, I think there's a few things that I'll mention. Number one, it brings economies of scale that has allowed us to accelerate in investing in services to our members and employers. For example, the launch of our portals, which we have great take-up rates from our members, our employers, and our retired members as well. So advancing some of our solutions and services that we can provide. Number two, if I look at our fiduciary duty, this makes the plan stronger. It diversifies the risk that we have from one industry. Now we're across 15 different industries. In fact, we added another industry earlier this year, so 16 different industries. So having that diversification across industry makes a lot of sense from a risk management perspective. And then finally, it's the right thing to do. So our members are taking pride that we're now opening up our plan to others so that their children, their friends, their colleagues who they've worked with in other organizations can have the same access they do to a great pension plan and a better retirement.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure if I mentioned this previously, but my very first job, Derek, was working as a part-time usher at a performing arts theater that was part of Seneca College. So I used to be a Seneca employee. I actually used to be a ROM employee for a long time. So I might have a record for the most CAT employers that I worked for. But I was thinking back to Seneca. I was thinking, okay, longtime members, a lot of our members at Seneca are longtime members. And I was thinking, if I'm a Seneca member and I've been with the plan for 25 years, how has growth specifically benefited me? Can you answer that?
Sure. So first of all, I hope we're your last employer, Russell, so you don't break any records here. But in terms of our long service members, I mean, there's really two things that have. So in 2009, when I started as CEO, that was a challenging time, global financial crisis, et cetera. So the plan was not 100% funded at that time. We're about 80% funded. And now we've grown to 124% funded. So from $1 billion deficit to almost a $5 billion surplus. So growth has been part of that story. The performance of our team is a huge part of that story. Our investment team has been doing wonders, but growth is part of that. It allows us to take a longer term view of our investment philosophy, which has added to our growing surplus. But from a member view, we've announced recently that in 2025, if you're a DB Prime member at Seneca, so if you're a full-time member, that your contribution rates are going to go down, but you're going to get the same great benefits. And if you're a part-time member at Seneca College, you're participating in DB Plus, like a lot of our other non-college employers. And for them, since contributions are fixed, they're going to see their benefits go up by about 11% at no change to their contributions. So that's a very specific example about how growth has not only helped in terms of what they're getting from the pension plan in terms of a value proposition, but it's also made the plan much stronger. And that's what our members have told us. Benefit security is the paramount thing that we should be focused on from a strategic lens, and that's what we've done.
That's great. So there's a direct line between, by growing the plan, we were able to make those plan enhancements.
Absolutely. It's a direct correlation.
Let's keep growing. I'm a member too. Let's keep going. Kind of a related question here, which is, what does it mean for Canada overall when CAT grows?
Yeah, in another panel session earlier today, they talked about the lack of good pension coverage in Canada. Maybe only 1 out of every 4 workers has a defined benefit, any pension plan in the workplace. And when we look at where Canada's demographics are going, we really need to step up if we want to maintain or have a healthy social security system, as an example. Because if people aren't retiring with sufficient income in retirement, this is a big headwind for Canada. So that's number one. It's good for Canada from a social program protection perspective. If we look at the economic value of pensions, for every pension dollar paid, there's $1.67 in economic activity. So there's a study, I participate in what's called the Canadian Public Pension Leadership Council. We commissioned a research study, and it showed that $1.67 in economic activity, which results in about 900,000 jobs being supported by the pension system in Canada. So it's a huge contributor to the overall economy, but it's also a huge contributor to local economies. So we know that where pensioners have sufficient income, they support their local stores, their local economy, keeping our small and large cities and towns active and vibrant. And then there's also, as I mentioned a little bit on the social side, there was also a study that was done by several pension plans in Canada, and CPPLC was one of the contributors there, which showed the social value of pensions, that people who feel secure in retirement, who have, like our retirees, a defined benefit pension plan, they volunteer more, they have less stress. So this contributes not only to the economic success of Canada, but also the social fabric of Canada as well. So it's a big deal.
That's great to hear. Okay, back to our member questions. We had several questions come in around 124%. Some people said, what is this 124%? Obviously, it's more than 100, so that sounds good, but I'm not sure what it is. There was also a comment that, we were at 124% funded last year. We're still there this year. What does it mean? So at a really high level, kind of, can you tell us about 124% and how we should feel about that, Derek?
Sure. So as you know, Russell, my background is in mathematics. So 124 is absolutely better than 100. So I'll just get that out of the way. But no, 124% funded, as Mike had shared, it means for every dollar of pension promise we've made to all of our active members, so the future pensions, all of our current retirees, we have $1.24 standing behind every dollar that we've promised. So it's a buffer that allows us to pay additional conditional inflation enhancements. So that's how it impacts members, both retired and active members. We're granting enhancements because we're over 100% funded. So that's how we give back. When the plan does better, members do better. And when members do better, employers do better from an attraction, retention, engagement, productivity perspective. So that's number one. 124 is very strong. The Income Tax Act actually has a limit of 125. So we are pretty close to the maximum that the income tax allows us to have from a funding perspective. So we've secured the pension promises really, really strongly, and now we can afford to provide some of the enhancements that are outlined in our funding policy. You also mentioned the difference between, we were 124% last year, we're 124% this year. Not to get too complicated here, but there's been changes in the investment market, changes in interest rates. So even though the headline number of 124% hasn't changed, so we're still very well funded year over year, sometimes the numbers flip around a little bit on the technical side because of what's called discount rates, which is what do we expect to earn on a go-forward basis, and that changes as interest rates move.
Thank you. That's helpful. Next question I have for you is a question that I received 2 weeks ago. I was talking to a former coworker of mine, and effectively it was, how is CAT able to fuel growth? Because it seems like so many employers are, they believe that people are fine with a DC pension. They're fine with an RRSP. So the perception is, people don't need a DB anymore. Can you speak to that?
Sure. And this is I'm not going to say a real common question, but a regular question that I'm often asked. And one of the subgroups talked about it. It's just better. It provides better outcomes. So I think we're trying to build awareness through our Plan Ambassador program and through getting our message out that now all Canadian workplaces can have access to a great defined benefit plan without taking on any of the risks that a single employer would take on. But there's a lot of studies, many of them show that defined benefit, because it's more efficient on the investment front, and because we pool longevity risk, we can deliver twice the pension compared to a defined contribution or a group RSP approach. So what I like to say as a mathematician is if we outperform, and we have been outperforming by just 1.5% to 2% per year, that adds up to doubling your pension. So it's not magic. It's really just better asset management, better pooling. This just allows better outcomes. So twice the pension for the same cost. If that's not a no-brainer, we also mentioned how having predictable, secure income in retirement, it also reduces the stress to employees. And we know when employees are stressed, there's a study that shows they lose about 6 hours of productivity a week at the job site if they feel stressed about the retirement finances. So not only is it better outcomes from a financial perspective, it's better outcomes from a wellness perspective. Those are just a couple of the things that I share with groups when they ask me those types of questions, that defined benefit plans are a much more efficient, much better outcomes for both employers and members. And we have a 97% endorsement across all of our members. That's regardless of age. So do DB pensions matter to younger workers? Absolutely. They would prefer a secure, predictable pension that's managed by us. They don't have to worry about the investment outcomes. So hopefully that gets at some of the questions that our members are asking about this.
A lot of our members are also wondering about inflation. We had a number of questions come in on inflation, and some of the questions are, what's the impact of inflation? How are rates determined around this? Will my CAT pension keep up with inflation? these are the kinds of questions that came in. And I guess the sort of umbrella question would be, how is CAT positioned for periods of high inflation, such as the moment we're living through right now?
Yeah, so there's a couple of angles there to that question. So first of all, yeah, inflation has a material impact on all our members and all our employers. But to pivot to your question on impact on the plan, as we just talked about, 124% funded, we're well positioned to absorb what's happening on the higher inflation side from a plan health perspective. So I'm not worried at all about inflation from a plan funding, plan sustainability perspective. And as many of our members know, their pensions, when they retire, they are inflation linked. So as long as the plan has $1 of surplus, we will grant extra inflation protection enhancements to all of our members. And since we introduced this pay inflation protection from our surplus model in 2007, we call it conditional inflation enhancements, we've never missed a payment, granting an enhancement each and every year through that whole process, including during the global financial crisis. So this, we have a strong record of paying inflation protection, because at the end of the day, retirees are trying to retain their purchasing power of their pension, and that's why we grant inflation protections. And it's the first priority in our funding policy. So as I said, as long as we have $1 of surplus, we're going to pay that. So that's more of a looking backwards perspective. If we look at it from a looking forward perspective, we do what's called an asset liability study, and it shows almost 100% likelihood, a 99.7% likelihood that we will grant additional inflation enhancements every year for the next 20 years. So retirees can count on that these conditional inflation enhancements will continue to be provided.
Thank you for that. In your role, I know you meet with a lot of influential business leaders across Canada, many of whom are on this call today. I'm curious, what are they telling you about kind of the market and what they're concerned about?
Yeah, what I'm finding is that it's a common theme. Like, even though we're across 16 different industries, from very small employers with just a couple of employees to employers with 5,000 or more in our plan, the themes are pretty common. How do I better attract and retain talent? How do I invest in the wellness of my workforce without taking on costs and risks that I can't absorb from a business perspective? So that's why they're coming to us, because we help on all those three issues. So that's at a very global perspective. What I'm also seeing specifically in many industries is really, it's changed from an abundance of people available and to work to a shortage. And that shortage, many leaders, including myself, are saying that is going to be a common theme. So we've actually coined the term at our plan, changing it from what some would say the war for talent to the marathon for talent. We have 1 million open jobs roughly in Canada, according to StatsCan, at the beginning of the year. And we have 4 million Canadians who are eligible to retire right now. So they'll likely retire in the next 10 years. Immigration will help, but this marathon for talent is going to persist. So this is what's on the mind of leaders across Canada, is how do they have a competitive advantage in this marathon for talent? And that's the type of discussions that we're hearing. And I'll just add one little extra thing, Russell, and that's a theme that, so I was on a webinar, our podcast with Dr. Susan Black from the Conference Board of Canada. And my key takeaway that I shared with all leaders across Canada is that if you don't get retention right, all the other issues of attraction, engagement, avoiding burnout risk, being an employer of choice, all of those issues risk magnify significantly. So we really help on that retention side of the business. So that's why Katie had mentioned we're having 3 new employers every business week join our pension plan, is because we really are a competitive advantage.
That's great. Thank you. We received a few questions about our Plan Ambassadors program. So Derek had referenced that a minute ago. This is a grassroots movement we started in 2022. But before I ask about that, I wanted to see who in the audience has signed up as a Plan Ambassador. I also wanted to say that you do get bonus points if you're wearing the shirt. You may see I'm wearing the shirt right now, Pensions for Everyone. So the poll question is, are you a plan ambassador? And your choices are yes. Number 2 is yes, and I'm wearing my shirt today. Number 3 is no, and number 4 is no, but I'd like to be. So let's see how we do on this poll. I'll give everybody a chance. So I see that in the lead with almost 50% is no. So if you're interested in learning more about our Plan Ambassadors program and kind of what's in it for you, you can go to pensionsforeveryone.ca. There's also some additional information in the CAT community section on the left-hand side to learn more about that program. Now I'm going to throw it to Derek and say, Derek, what can you tell us about the Plan Ambassadors program and why CAT decided to start that movement?
Yeah, so in terms of the Plan Ambassador program, so I also have a t-shirt. I'm not wearing it today, as you can clearly tell, Russell, but I'm proud to wear that t-shirt because what we're trying to do with that program is bring awareness that pensions matter. They matter to employees, they matter to employers, which we just covered, and they matter to Canada in terms of making Canada successful in the ability to attract and retain workers from across the world. So the Plan Ambassadors program is really a chance for people to hear and get the research that we partner with some of our peer plans across Canada and want to share that this is a cornerstone or can be a cornerstone of employer, member, and Canada's success on a go-forward basis. So the Plan Ambassador program does a lot more than that, but that's the cornerstone for me, is bringing awareness that pensions matter to all those stakeholders.
I think I shared with you previously, Derek, my mom is a retired HOOP member and worked at Toronto General Hospital her whole career, and really proud of her job, really happy about her pension, of course, but from time to time would encounter, I guess you might say, a little bit of bitterness that she had this pension and, friends or people that she knew in the private sector didn't. And her response was always, it's not that I want this for myself. I would love to have this for everyone. How can we do that? Right. And here she is, a hospital worker. She doesn't necessarily have the solution, but her sentiment was everyone should have this. So of all the work that we do at CAT, my mom is the biggest fan of the Plan Ambassadors program because she wants everybody to have a great DB pension like she has.
Well, I think your mom and my spouse should get together to see who's the biggest champion of defined benefit plans in Canada, because my wife is a big champion of them as well. She wears I Love DB buttons whenever she can. But I think you've raised an important point, Russell, in that so I've been in this industry. My first pension job was in 1988, so 35 years ago. And the industry has been talking about the lack of pension coverage, the lack of efficiency in the system for 3 decades. And so it was really the joint governance structure, our sponsors of our plan, our employers, our unions, our members, really allowing CAT to not only articulate what the challenge is with the lack of pension coverage or efficient pension coverage, but also then to actually take that and saying, no, what? We're going to roll up our sleeves and we're going to solve the problem. So we really changed it from what I would call a pension envy situation of how do I get access to this HOOP pension, the Healthcare of Ontario pension plan. And CAT now has opened up the doors to saying, regardless of where you are, we have members in every single province, including the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. Regardless of industry, regardless of employer size, everyone can have access to a secure, predictable lifetime income pension. And it's all at a fixed cost to both employers and members. So we took the issue and the risk that has been talked about for 3 decades, and we solved the problem, or we did that. So the Plan Ambassador program to me is, now our challenge is we've made access available. Now, how do we build awareness that this access actually exists?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one question came in and said, what does CAT stand for? So that's a bit of a softball. I can take that, which is the Colleges of Applied Arts and Technology pension plan. But I think kind of underneath that question, Derek, is CAT was traditionally focused on the College of Ontario, the colleges of Ontario. Now we have non-college employers as well. Can you talk a little bit about that? So I guess the history, and also what is the role that the colleges of Ontario play in helping lead the plan?
Yeah, and there is as you're mentioning, there is a proud history of our origins, and a proud acknowledgement that it's through our origin sponsors of allowing us to open up the plan to other groups for the benefit, as we've mentioned before, of our members and our existing employers. It makes the plan stronger, more sustainable. But we started in 1967 as the sole pension plan for the college system in Ontario. And we evolved in 1995 to become what's called a jointly sponsored pension plan. So that's half of our board seats are comprised of member representatives, so OPSEU and OCASA, and half of them represent employers' interests on behalf of the college board. So in 1995, we became this jointly sponsored program. And then fast forward to 2015, that's when we opened up to the Royal Ontario Museum, our first non-college system related employer, quickly followed by Youth Services Bureau, opened it up to the private sector with Torstar being our first pension merger in the private sector. And then we decided boldly in 2020, just 2 years ago, to open up to all provinces and all industries as well. So that's our evolution from 1967 till now. But getting back to the core of the question, the people who have, the groups who have made this possible of opening up our coverage is based on our founders. So the college system in Ontario and the unions, union and non-unionized associations who started this plan originally.
Yeah, and I really think we have to credit them for that, both the unions and the colleges, for having the vision to open up the plan and really thinking about it. There would be no pensions for everyone if it wasn't for their leadership.
Absolutely. And I remember the meetings well. It was maybe 4 or 5 meetings with those groups, and they had something that was great. Our plan was running very well, and it took a lot of discussion, a lot of dialogue, a lot of transparency of why this was needed to get everybody aligned to our mission, vision, and purpose statements. So I'm not going to say, because I'm getting a lot of calls from other public sector plans and boards to say, we want to do what CAT's doing. And I hope they do, because the purpose statement is to improve retirement income security for Canadians. It doesn't mean by joining the CAT pension plan. If we spur additional innovation in the industry, that's wonderful. So it solves that coverage adequacy efficiency equation that I was mentioning before. But yeah, it was a lot of discussion. So it wasn't a frivolous talk. There was a lot of analysis that went into this, but you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, our plan sponsors decided not only is this good for the plan, it's also the right thing to do.
I want to get more into those plan changes, plan enhancements actually that you talked about earlier for both DB Prime and DB Plus. So you shared a little bit into that. So I won't, not the technical details, but maybe kind of where it came from, how we were able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two angles I'm thinking in my head on this one, Russell. So there's sort of the funding angle of how did we get there, how were we able to afford those changes, and then it's maybe more the process and structure about how we actually decide on what enhancements are going to be made. So on the funding side, it's been a very focused effort to make sure we were building up reserves, because our number one priority is benefit security. We're going to protect benefits that we've promised. By law, we can't reduce them unless the whole plan winds up. So all of our 300 plus employers all cease operations. So that's close to a 0% probability from a mathematical perspective. So we've been building these reserves, but we've also been following from that process perspective a funding policy that we created in 2006, which said, as the plan does better, here's how we're going to give more back to our members and employers. So this happened before DB Plus even existed. Then we amended our funding policy when we created DB Plus in 2018. So basically, it's a roadmap, which is on our website. So again, we're very transparent, and it shows as the funding gets better, If we have $1 surplus, we're going to play conditional inflation enhancements. As the plan gets better, we're going to provide wage enhancements to our DB Plus member. We're going to have better early retirement provisions. And what you're referring to now, Russell, is we've reached funding level 5, which is very well funded, that 124% that we mentioned before. And that now allows us, with good, strong reserves, to start reducing DB Prime contributions for both members and employers for those who participate in that plan, because contribution up and down is the lever in that plan. But for DB Plus members, because contributions are fixed, it's really we're going to enhance benefits. So we have equity across those two groups. And I'm also looking forward, I mentioned our asset liability studies briefly, but the asset liability studies show that we should continue to progress to funding level 6, where additional enhancements can be made, further reductions in DB Prime contribution rates, further increases in DB Plus plan provisions, including adding additional inflation protection to some of our members who don't have inflation protection today. So we're very focused on keeping the plan healthy and making progress to funding level 6.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is, as the plan gets stronger, the way that that allows us to reinvest in our members by enhancing the value of the plan, and that we're not going to stop doing that we are, at level 5, and the plan can get even stronger from that point on to level 6. And at that point, we'll be able to do even more, correct?
Absolutely. In short form, our focus is benefit security, equity across members, and value. So it's driving value as part of our funding policy so we can grant more enhancements.
So I think with that said, I think we need to talk about inflation protection again. So we did have questions come in about inflation, and there were a few questions that came in specifically about inflation protection for service before 1992. And there's one question in particular from Susan, and I'm just going to read her question because I think it captures the spirit of a couple of questions we've received. So Susan asks, please address how CAT plans to help retirees with service prior to 1992. Many of these folks are really struggling to make ends meet with the significant cost of living increases of late.
Yeah, so, and for the benefit of everybody else on the call, so our plan has really 3 inflation periods. Pre-92, it's granted on an ad hoc basis. So when the plan gets to funding level 6, we can provide those enhancements. 92 to 2007, guaranteed inflation protection. But when 2007, 2008, 2009 global financial crisis happened, there was a decision. Is that affordable? Are we willing to increase contributions by another 3% for members and employers to pay for that? And the decision was no. So we moved to conditional inflation protection. So that's the context for everybody. So pre-92, absolutely, it's a high priority once we get to funding level 6, and we're making steady progress to that. So we absolutely, I meet with the retiree associations at their annual general meeting. We have discussions about this, and our goal is that we can restart providing ad hoc increases. But I also mentioned briefly, Russell, about equity. So members, we want to make sure that there's fair value per contribution dollar happening for different generations. And the current generation of members are paying more than the prior generations pre-92. So from that equity principle, that's what was derived in our funding policy of trying to balance out return on contributions. So that's a long-winded answer, but we are focused on getting to funding level 6 and be able to provide those enhancements once again.
Okay, so I'm hearing you're looking to balance and create fairness and equity amongst different member groups, but you've heard the concern about pre-92, and when we have the ability to do so, that is a priority on the list.
Absolutely. And I share all the letters that come from retiree associations with our board and sponsors committee. So they're fully aware of the concerns that have been raised by Susan and others. So they are on top of it. And that funding policy is really how we navigate that balance between equity and value.
Thank you. We've received a few questions around kind of CAT's mission. And sometimes I've heard this question phrased as, is CAT moving away or pivoting away from defined benefit pensions? Can you speak to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So our friends at Unifor and CUPE both directly asked me about this question because at a pension conference there was somebody not from CAT who mentioned that CAT is moving away from DB. Nothing defined benefit. Nothing could be further from the truth than that statement. So CAT is 100% committed to secure, predictable lifetime income with inflation protection and surviving spouse benefits. That is defined benefit. What we're doing is we're launching an additional product, which is coming late 2024 for all of our members. All our active members will have access to it, which allows them to save above and beyond what their workplace pension allows for. So this is not an abandoning DB Plus, it's DB pensions. This is listening to our members and employers saying, we'd like another tool because I first joined my employer who has DB Plus when I was age 42. What do I do with my 150,000 account balance from my group RSP? Can you help me manage that? Can you help me grow that? So we're just bringing additional options, which 53% of our members who responded to our survey on this said they want CAT to offer this additional way to save for retirement. So we're committed to DB, but we're also committed to innovating and giving additional ways for members to enhance their retirement.
Thank you for that. We've got a couple of live questions coming in right now. So we have a question from Randy, and the question is, Derek, on how many years on average would it take to get back all the money that a member contributes? And Randy says, from his perspective, this would be the point that RRSPs would be exhausted. So it'd be interesting to know how much extra money we are receiving because CAT is a defined benefit pension.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to boil down the technical difficulties. So typically our average member gets what I would call the return on their contributions within the first 3, 4, or 5 years, depending how long they've been in the system. So that's sort of when they're positive. And we have a minimum payment guarantee of at least 60 months. So everybody's always getting at least back their contributions in the plan. I think the question is more than at what date of death is it better to be in CAT, DB Prime, or DB Plus compared to managing the money on your own? So it really depends on the fees. Canada, unfortunately, has some of the highest retail fees for retirees, and the Financial Planners Group has a low and high fee. So it's somewhere balancing all things together, retiring at age 65, compared to the same amount of money that you'd be getting from the CAT pension plan. You're running out of money somewhere between 73 to 77, 78. So, and the average, so I don't know the stats exactly off by heart, but more than half of Canadians will see their 90th birthday. So the average Canadian will have like a 13 to 15 year gap compared to group RSP, compared to the CAT pension plan. And we have members who live to 100 and beyond. So we take away that risk about living your savings. That is the beauty of defined benefit plans. So it's pretty hard to outperform our pension plan. And as I said, even if members die below that age 73, we do have minimum payment guarantees, and we have free surviving spouse benefits as well. So if they have a spouse, they'll get a pension for as long as they live as well.
What age do you start writing those birthday cards? Is it 90? Is it 100? When does that start?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do is I write birthday cards to our members when they hit their 90th birthday. But I also write them when they reach their 100th birthday milestone as well. And as I said, 50% of our members, so we have 86,000 members and growing every year. So I'm going to get writer's cramp on this. I don't know if I started something with thinking so far ahead.
Wow. We have another question from Vlad. So Vlad asks, Derek, are you able to go over some of the risks associated with joining the CAT pension plan?
Yeah. Do you think that's from an employer or a member perspective, Russell?
I believe it's from an employer perspective.
Yeah. So we this is a common question. We actually have a couple decks that we share with all of our employers thinking about joining, about what are the pros and the cons. I think I've covered off most of the pros, so let's just focus on the cons. So it's really, you are joining a plan that has a lot of things built in. So free surviving spouse benefits, inflation protection, etc. So employers can't perfectly tailor it to perhaps their exact needs. As mentioned in the previous panel, we allow employers to choose what contribution rates are affordable. So that's usually the number one issue for employers. So that's not a con in our plan. In 2022, we started creating additional flexibility based on employer feedback, allowing waiting periods. Maybe one group is right for our plan and another group isn't, so we can choose which cohort joins our pension plan. So those cons have now been removed from that, and they're now on the pro side. So it's really just the ability to perfectly tailor it to the exact needs of your workforce. We haven't seen that as a barrier to very many employers. So typically when we have a meeting with an employer, I would say about 85, one meeting with an employer, about 85% of those employers end up joining the pension plan.
Not sure if Vlad had this in mind, but I'm just wondering if you can also speak to, when I talk to people that I know about CAT and about DB pensions, they have one kind of big risk in mind, which is the liability sitting on the balance sheet. Can you speak to that?
Right. Sure. So that's the beauty of DB Plus, is there is nothing on the balance sheet. So it is a fixed cost. So from all accounting standards, we actually have an accounting fact sheet that we share with employers. All the different accounting standards that are out there, they all comply with the same rules as defined contribution or group RSP accounting. So it's simply expense the contributions, nothing on the balance sheet. Very, very different from a traditional single employer pension plan where the employer owns the risk and it is on the balance sheet. So this is an important point. Thank you, Russell.
So Kathy asks, the plan seems strong from a member perspective, but where do you think it could be stronger, Derek? How would you like to improve the plan moving forward?
Yeah, so really, I'm in my head, I'm thinking about our 2040 strategy and where are we focusing on attention. So we're continuing to overinvest in communications, because members only are de-stressed and employers only get the maximum value of the pension plan when employees know about their pension plan. And there's a direct correlation with the number of interactions with their pension plan in the employee net promoter score. So that's an area of focus of, we need to get our members really understanding what a big deal their pension plan is, because that benefits them from a health perspective and a wellness perspective, but it benefits the employers from an attraction retention perspective. So that's a cornerstone of our 2040 strategy. Innovation is another cornerstone. We know that workplaces, the economy is constantly evolving. So we have to make sure that the pension products that we offer are relevant not only to one industry, but multiple industries and as things evolve. So that's another big pillar. And then, of course, we have maintaining benefit security. So we spend a lot of time on risk management, of saying what risks are coming down, whether they're investment risk or other things that are happening politically or in the economy, that we need to make sure that we're on top of. So those would be some of the things that our 2040 strategy is focused on, is being relevant, ensuring that we keep the plan strong on a go-forward basis.
Great. We're almost out of time. So before we do close this segment and our annual conference overall, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to share any thoughts on what our members and employers can look forward to hearing from the plan this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Russell. So I think I've mentioned before, the plan was built on transparency. So please sign up for Plan Ambassadors program. Please continue to follow us on our website and our LinkedIn profiles. We're sharing that information all the time. And as was hinted, we're launching an additional product in late 2024, but we're going to start sharing more information as that product gets built in the next quarter or so. So I encourage our members, our employers, our prospective members and employers, our participating unions, to reach out to us if you have ideas on how to that we can serve your needs better, but also follow us to make sure you're keeping up to date as our flexibility changes, that we want to be relevant to you.
Thanks, Derek. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was a great conversation, and I thank you for making the time.
My pleasure, Russell, and thank you everyone for attending.
If you submitted a question today and it was not answered by Derek, I wanted to let you know that our team is reviewing every single question, and we will connect with you and we will get you an answer to your question. Thank you so much for attending our Pensions for Everyone conference today. We'll have a recording available on catpension.ca along with other resources related to the session. Before you go, we'd appreciate if you could answer one brief poll for us so we can see how we can do better with future conferences. Thanks again.